Hello and welcome to a new edition of the Silver Bulletin. I'm James King, the LTV Sports Director.
And I'm Alicia Graves, the Assistant Sports Director.
Let's get right into the highlights from last week's games against Maryland. The Terrapins came to Columbus atop the Big Ten East with a win over Texas and Austin earlier this year, but the Buckeyes quickly dispelled any inklings of an upset. The Buckeyes got the opening kick and marched down the field, and senior quarterback J.T. Barrett put Ohio State on the board first with this one-yard touchdown run. Just 3 plays into their first drive of the day, Maryland's quarterback Max Bortenschlager was stripped of the ball by Nick Bosa. Jerome Baker recovered the ball at the 20 and carried it into the end zone, putting the Buckeyes up 14-0 early in the first. Special team struggles continued for the Buckeyes, and on the ensuing kickoff, the Terrapins' Ty Johnson took it 100 yards to the house, cutting the Buckeyes' lead in half. After a decent return from Paris Campbell, the Buckeyes found themselves deep into Maryland territory when Barrett connected with sophomore running back Mike Weber for this 53-yard gain. Following a few short runs from Dobbins, Barrett found sophomore wide receiver Benjamin Victor in the back of the end zone. After a bad snap and hold on the point-after attempt, punter Drew Chrisman was forced to scramble, and the Buckeyes failed to convert their point-after attempt. Ohio State cornerback Denzel Ward has been having his best season so far, but on the next Maryland drive, he would get called for targeting. After a quick review, Ward's targeting call was upheld, and he was ejected from the game. The Buckeyes forced Maryland to punt, and after moving the ball down to the Terrapin 29-yard line, they would be forced to settle for a 47-yard field goal attempt. Sean Nurnberger had been perfect 7 for 7 on the field goal attempts this season until this attempt was blocked by Maryland, keeping the score at 20-7. Nurnberger would go on to miss another field goal later in the game. Then later in the second quarter, the Buckeyes would work the ball into the red zone yet again, this time with a couple of runs from freshman running back J.K. Dobbins. With the ball at the 10-yard line, Barrett hit tight end Marcus Ball in the flat, and then Ball made this spectacular leap over the defender and into the end zone. Barrett would end the game with 261 yards in the air, along with 4 total touchdowns. Dobbin tallied 96 yards on the ground, and Weber tacked on 112 all-purpose yards. The Ohio State defense held Maryland to just 66 total offensive yards for the game and only gave up 1 offensive touchdown late in the fourth quarter.
And now it's time for the top 5 plays from Saturday's game against Maryland. Starting off the countdown at number 5 is Maryland running back Ty Johnson. Ohio State kicker Sean Nurnberger made a 65-yard kickoff that was then returned for an 100-yard touchdown by Johnson. Johnson was able to make his way through the Ohio State defenders and put Maryland on the scoreboard. Number 4 goes to junior wide receiver Paris Campbell. Campbell showed off his impeccable speed by outrunning Maryland's defense to score this 24-yard touchdown. The number 3 spot goes to junior cornerback Denzel Ward. This play went viral after Ward made a big hit against Maryland wide receiver Tavon Jacobs that sent him flying. While many on social media believed it to be a solid hit, Ward was ejected from the game for targeting. At number 2, we have sophomore defensive lineman Nick Bosa and junior linebacker Jerome Baker. Bosa sacked the Maryland quarterback, causing a forced fumble that was then scooped up by Baker, who scored a 20-yard touchdown. Baker was named Defensive Player of the Game by the coaching staff. And the number 1 play goes to senior tight end Marcus Ball for channeling former Ohio State running back Ezekiel Elliott. Ball gets the top spot for this big hurdle over a Maryland defender into the end zone after catching a 10-yard pass from quarterback J.T. Barrett. Saturday, over 107,000 fans gathered in the shoe to watch the Buckeyes take on the Terrapins, and the stands were filled with pink to honor breast cancer awareness. Ohio State players wore pink ribbon decals on their helmets to raise awareness. During the game, survivors were honored center field and cheered on by fans for their fight against breast cancer. This past weekend, there are some big upsets in college football. Let's take a look at how the Buckeyes and other teams stand in this week's AP poll.
The Buckeyes inched their way closer to the top, moving up 1 spot for the second consecutive week. This week we saw a little shakeup in the rankings as Oklahoma was upset by Iowa State and dropped to 12. Michigan's home loss to Michigan State slid them all the way down to the 17th spot in the polls. Now there are just 3 Big Ten teams left in the top 10. Penn State moving up a spot to number 3, Wisconsin jumping 2 spots to number 7, and Ohio State now at number 9. And now let's take a look at how the Buckeyes did in the NFL this week. Los Angeles Chargers defensive end Joey Bosa was all over the field Sunday as the Chargers defeated the New York Giants 27-22. Bosa had 6 tackles, 2 sacks of Eli Manning, and a tackle for a loss.
New York Jets linebacker Darren Lee had an impressive outing against the Cleveland Browns on Sunday as the second-year starter had 6 tackles, including a huge tackle for loss in a close game. Lee had a penalty early and left the game with an injury, but he returned in the second quarter and managed to add 4 tackles and a tackle for loss.
New York Giants cornerback Eli Apple started Sunday's game on the bench. However, he had a solid outing against the Chargers, registering 5 tackles in the defensive backfield. The Giants have had a rough start to the season as they are now 0-5 following yesterday's loss.
That's all we have for you this week on the Silver Bulletin. Be sure to subscribe to Lantern TV on YouTube and like us on Facebook. Also, for game day coverage, follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and add us on Snapchat. Thanks for tuning in. See you next week.
See ya.